This is the Magnavox Odyssey. It was released in 1972, making it the first home video game console. This is what it's capable of. That's right. It's a white square, and you can move it around. That's your character. That's your game piece. That's your game. Now, this might seem like a strange place to start in a video about race and gender roles, but it's an important reminder of this. The technological advancements and limitations of the video game medium are linked hand in hand with the content on screen. And in fact, the medium itself often imparts something, whether visually or tangibly, to the player. There's no question that technology is implicit in creating the social issues of video games. But while the limited nature of video games early on had a hand in creating these issues, has the passage of time, the removal of these limitations, really fixed anything? The point of this video is to explain and discuss the unique ways in which video games have handled and created issues of race, culture, and gender over the last 35 years or so, and how they've evolved alongside the technology by which they're presented. Basis. Video games are a unique medium whose content and influence on the player is directly linked to the ever-changing technological and design limitations of the medium. And it's because of this that representations of race and gender therein have often been less than ideal. However, although the technological nature of games have changed, the nature of games as a medium mean that these problems still persist. While games have advanced, game design really hasn't, and so technology doesn't really change much. To discuss this, I'll go over both narrative and design in games, how each affects the player, and how they affect the content of the game. And I'll take a look at how each of these might apply in the modern day. First off, narrative. Let's start at the start. The earliest games were, like the Odyssey, just blocks on a black screen. Real simple, not much character to them. A lot of them didn't even have sound. But even as early as the Atari 2600, we start to see the same archetypical setups we see in movies. You're the big man, look at this gun and you shoot. Still pretty basic. It's not so much that they don't pitch complex situations, but that they can't. What's most notable early on is the trend of the classic adventuring hero, especially once we enter the 8-bit era. 8 bits, that's 8 digits of binary, that's 255 colors, and 4 at a time on sprites, including transparency. You can actually play as a fat little human man, or a child, or a Beetlejuice. And it feels different. This is the start of the player identifying with, or understanding, or liking their character, and so the most popular games of the time look an awful lot like films of the 1940s, plot-wise. Big, broad characters, archetypes, a leading man and a damsel in distress, really basic villains. Normative stories that have reflected the core of gender roles pretty much forever. See, video games function on very simple task-reward relationships. You do something, you get a pleasing chime, you get to play more. You beat up 100 guys, your guy gets stronger, you can beat up more guys. So video games tend to be built around really recognizable, really basic, and archetypical goals. Save the girl, save the world, be the strongest. Because the nature of game design's rarely moved past this, we've started to see more diverse main characters, but even still, every game is about progression, growth, achievement. It's how the medium teaches us to think, in goals, enemies, and solutions. Take the recent game Life is Strange, which explores gender, friendship, youth, a really non-traditional story in a game, and there's little gameplay beyond dialogue and narrative choices. Even a game so far from basic as this still has a main villain and a looming end-of-game threat. It can't help itself. Narrative in games is always going to be simple and goal-oriented at its core. Change the subject and punch out every character's kinda racist. Piston Honda's from Japan, he's a martial artist. Soda Popinski is from Russia, but in Japan his uncensored name is Vodka Drunkinski and his shtick was being drunk on vodka constantly. Great Tiger is from India, has a jeweled turban, does esoteric magics, and his coach appears to be a dead tiger pelt. And the Italian guy is pretty normal, I guess. I forget his name, let's see, And yet we see this in lots of popular games. Street Fighter II, one of the most famous games of all time, has the subhead, The World Warrior. Each character represents their country. America, Japan, China, Russia, India, South America, America again, Japan again. Characters added later came from Thailand, Jamaica, even Great Britain, and the trend continues to this day. So why do games, especially from this era, do this? In short, it's because it's an easy and effective way to design a roster of very different and recognizable characters. See, in video games, things need to be instantly recognizable. Things glow if they matter. Characters are given things just to keep them unique and identifiable so the player can track everything that's going on. You reduce things down to tools and signifiers because that's how you communicate things to the player. Otherwise, a game is frustrating to play because you don't have all the tools. It's always worked this way. Apply this to characters, though, and you start to see the issue. A really effective character set consists of a lot of caricature and broad strokes. It makes for a good cast, but again, a troublingly reductive view of certain cultures. And while something like these casts applies more in the pixel art era, where making things look different was harder, and there wasn't really a PC culture yet, the concept applies just as much today. Why do you think every big military shooter has the enemies be foreign-looking foreigners? Same reason there's no aliens on your side in the first Halo game. This is us, this is them. It's good to know when you're playing who the enemy is. What sucks is when those enemies represent real people and cultures in the real world. It's pretty okay to dehumanize aliens or Nazis for the sake of game design, for the sake of knowing who you're supposed to be shooting at. But Russians and Middle Easterners, depicted as cruel as they come for the sake of making them compelling villains, it's not a step forward from the cartoony racism possible in pixel art, it's a step back. There's a hope, I think, that racism can't be updated. That something cartoony and old and busted is so far from what we make and play now that we feel distant from racism, even when it's staring us right in the face. But the fact is, the fix for fair representation in video games lies at the production level. Games are getting better and more inclusive and more interesting in the stories that they tell. And it's happening because we're paying attention to it. Because developers take these issues seriously. In conclusion, I say to game developers, keep the faith. If you don't make a game that's not racist, it's not going to make itself. Thanks for watching.